character of Aquaman is actually a very interesting and unique hero, a Golden Age character even. Aquaman has had a bad reputation in modern times as a weak hero with useless powers. But in actuality, he is actually quite powerful and his abilities very unique. The problem is that for decades he has been written poorly, and as a result of this, his public image has suffered. As a result of lack of writers actually using the character to his full potential, instead they made him rather brooding and unsure of himself, an outlook similar to Batman. The exact details will be mentioned later. Let the discussion begin with his origin. Aquaman has actually had different origins depending on the era that the character was used and identified with. The Golden Age version had him not with a lot of detail with reference to his childhood, parents, or much detail about himself. Most adventures focus on what he dealt with in that particular moment, and few examples exist about his agendas besides heroism. First appearance, More Fun Comics, issue 73, November 1941. Lost appearance, All-Star Squadron, issue 60, August 1986. One quote from his past. The story must start with my father, a famous undersea explorer. If I spoke his name, you would recognize it. My mother died when I was a baby, and he turned to his work of solving the ocean's secrets. His greatest discovery was an ancient city, in the depths where no other diver had ever penetrated. My father believed it was the lost kingdom of Atlantis. He made himself a watertight home in one of the places and lived there, studying the records and devices of the race's marvelous wisdom. From the books and records, he learned the ways of teaching me to live under the ocean, drawing oxygen from the water, and using all the power of the sea to make me wonderfully strong and swift. By training and 100 scientific secrets, I became what you see, a human being who lives and thrives under the water." End quote. In September of 1947, Adventure Comics issue 120, Aquaman actually adopts a temporary alias of a Mr. Waterman to enroll in an American university. Aquaman's parents are not exactly mentioned besides one fact that Aquaman mentioned that he obtained his powers from his father, some sort of scientific experiment. His nationality is American, and that he was privately tutored. Unlike the modern Aquaman, he was not a citizen of Atlantis nor affiliated with its royalty. It's actually acknowledged that his real name is indeed Aquaman. A comment from his father is as quoted, "My son is a true dweller of the deep. His name shall be Aquaman." Though with the magic of the Golden Age, an interesting theory is that he was taught to breathe underwater by his father. Panels from when the character's origin was explained upon, as mentioned, further add to the now abandoned concept that the character was simply taught to hold his breath for longer periods of time, and then finally to breathe underwater. The idea is not exactly madness. Maritime cultures all over the world have men and women who dive deep depths into the ocean and train themselves as a result of this to hold their breaths for longer periods of time underwater. The exact powers of the Golden Age Aquaman were similar to the Silver Age version, but they differed slightly in the fact that the range in which he could telepathically communicate and control sea creatures was limited to mostly those within his direct vicinity. In his earliest Golden Age appearances, Aquaman can breathe underwater and control fish and other aquatic creatures for up to a minute. Initially, he was depicted as speaking to sea creatures quote-unquote in their own language, rather than telepathically, and only when they were close enough to hear him. Some accounts have it within 18 meter or 20 yards radius. Aquaman's adventures took place all over the world, and his base was a quote-unquote a wrecked fishing boat kept underwater, in which he lived. One fact, though simple, could also show the difference between the Golden and Silver Age versions of Aquaman. The Golden Age version wore yellow gloves, and the latter Silver Age version wore green gloves. The green gloves in discussion were first seen in Adventure Comics issue 221, April 1955. The Golden Age Aquaman fought various villains, most notable Blackjack the Modern Pirate. First appearance, More Fun Comics, issue 74, December 1941. Lost appearance, Adventure Comics, issue 151, April 1950. his allies being the reoccurring supporting characters Ark the Sea Lion and the Sea Sleuth. All were erased from existence by the Crisis on Infinite Earths. The Silver Age origin of Aquaman is the most well-known version of his background. An American naval test near a certain area of the ocean caught Aquaman's attention, and coming up to the ship he mentions to the captain that this area in particular is very important to him, sentimental even. Upon the captain's request to hear why the nautical tests should be moved to another location, Aquaman recounts his origin story. Before he was born, his father, Tom Curry, was a retired sailor who lived on a solitary island out in the ocean. One night, while on watch in a watchtower on the island during a savage storm, he spots something out in the waves. Upon further observation, he discovers a woman on board a raft. Saving her from certain death, the two felt an instant connection and were soon married, as the woman, whose name was Atlanta, was distant about herself and her own past, as Tom thought it odd, and soon they had a child, which was a splitting image of her. The child was later named Arthur Curry, and the first example of the fact that he wasn't an ordinary child was on board a vessel and young Arthur accidentally fell overboard. Tom was frantic about their son's safety, but Atlanta mentioned that there would be no worries as soon as shocked Tom saw young Arthur swimming better than he himself could. Another childhood example had Arthur swimming near great white sharks and they did not attempt to attack him at all, thus increasing Tom's suspicions that his wife and son weren't ordinary humans. Sadly, Atlanta was soon on her deathbed, and only then did she reveal the truth to her husband and son, that she was from the fabled lost city of Atlantis, but she had a natural curiosity of the outside world. Caught trying to venture away from Atlantis when she was tried by a jury and banished from Atlantis during the banishment was when she was saved by Tom. After Atlanta's death, Tom was determined to help his son Arthur hone his Atlantic abilities, as he later built a gigantic water tank to help Arthur build and train his telepathic ability to speak with and control aquatic life. With gradual success with this, Arthur's power began to become more honed. One day while swimming deep beneath the ocean, Arthur noticed that there was a squid pinned beneath a sunken ship. Using telepathic commands, he summoned other marine life from miles away to push the ship away and save the squid's life. Later on, all maritime life recognized him as the ruler of all the oceans. His mother's pledge for her son and his father's determination to realize that pledge had indeed come true. Aquaman, Arthur Curry, son of the American sea captain Tom Curry in Atlanta of Atlantis, was now the ruler of the world's oceans. With the tale finished, the sea captain decided to change the tests to another location. A grateful Aquaman leaves and ventures back into the deep sea. A final panel reveals that the nature of the proposed tests were nuclear and the location was that of Atlantis, his mother's ancestral home and his own royal residence. Throughout the Silver Age, Aquaman had first encountered villains and heroes alike, including his wife Mera and his greatest foe Black Manta. One Silver Age adventure from 1971, Superboy issue 171, where Aquaman was calling himself Aquaboy, met Superboy, whom was the only publicly active hero in the world at the time. Shortly after this encounter, Arthur would call himself Aquaman once he was a fully grown adult. These are some of the origins and tales of Aquaman that is now known and accepted to be fact throughout the DC universe. The Bronze Age origin this time has the story before he was born is that his parents are Atlantean royalty. King Travis and Queen Atlanta were trying to conceive an heir to the throne by Travis, but he in fact was sterile. Wanting to have a child to the throne, Atlanta was approached by the court wizard Atlan. Once Queen Atlanta was pregnant, there was joy throughout Atlantis because there was now an heir to continue on the bloodline. As Atlan mentioned to Atlanta that he would sire another child because he mentioned that there must always be struggle and conflict for the throne of Atlantis. Atlan named the boy Orin, and soon King Travis knew that the child wasn't his, when the boy was found out to have blonde hair and blue eyes, reminiscent of an ancient Atlantean curse. Being shunned as an outcast, young Orin was left to die on a small natural reef out in the Atlantic Ocean. It was believed that once the tide receded and the infant was exposed to the combination of air and sunlight, the child would naturally die. However, unknown to those who left him, Orin had become adjusted to air and sunlight, and the infant's ability to communicate with maritime life was critical when a pod of dolphins came to his aid and helped rescue him and helped him until he was able to swim away from the reef, which was later called Mercy Reef ironically, until he gradually found his way to Curry Lighthouse off the American state of Maine. Being adopted by the couple who owned the lighthouse, their adoptive name for him being that of Arthur Curry. One of Orin's first superhero exploits was when he teamed up with Wonder Woman to help her when one of Poseidon's sons, Triton, tried to claim her as a wife when he helped her repulse the unwanted advances. Another encounter with the Flash formerly had the speedster call Orin Aquaman during a conflict with the Trickster. Through later circumstances, he learns of his Atlantean heritage and his birthright as the King of Atlantis. One of the most tragic and iconic examples of Aquaman was when Black Manta had taken over a small colony of pacifists while trying to create his own form of a utopia. Aquaman and Aqualad were captured by Manta and forced to fight one another to the death for the life of Aquaman's son, Aquababy. Though the duo were able to escape their containment, they were unable to save Aquaman's son nor stop Black Manta from escaping. Seeking revenge for the death of his son, Orin relentlessly into an abandoned undersea minefield, and he himself almost died during this conflict. Right at the moment where Orin had Manta, he could have had the revenge that he wanted for his own son, but he remembered the ideals that he had valued, and to not become a murderer like Manta. It was one of the hardest things he had to do as a man, and as a superhero, as he later had Black Manta arrested. In 1989, writers began to experiment with new directions for the character. One was giving him a new costume. This so-called camouflage costume, it didn't last long as fan reception to it was mostly negative. One of the most drastic and visible changes for the character came in the 1990s, owing to the decade of being extreme and edgy. As mentioned before, Aquaman can sometimes be regarded as a hero that isn't taken seriously and not particularly powerful due to writing and circumstances. It starts with Aquaman receiving the Atlantean Chronicles, information regarding the history of Atlantis, and he himself starts to become more in tune with his Atlantean heritage. Upon discovering that the Ocean Master, a villain of his, is actually his half-brother, he becomes depressed upon this news. Still with the revelation of his brother in the back of his mind, he is later kidnapped by a minor villain, Chabrius, and during the battle, the foe forces Aquaman's left hand into a pool of flesh-eating piranhas. His entire hand is consumed by the fish, and is eventually victorious from the battle. This started the somewhat more edgy look and feel for Aquaman that persisted throughout the 1990s. He wasn't one to be pushed around, nor let things affect him too much anymore. The whole concept of this and the overall fan reaction to it was mixed. Some indeed liked the new direction for the character, while others thought it was too unlike Aquaman to show off in such a way. Though he later got back his hand through magical means, the harpoon aspect would later live on in the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited cartoon series of the early 2000s, where Aquaman was a founding member of the Justice League of America, but was not a regular within the show. Modern origins have it similar to the Silver Age version, with him being of mixed blood of the American sea captain Tom Curry and the Atlantean princess Atlana. The modern aspects of Aquaman have also changed somewhat, owing to his mental psionic commands could mentally control any marine life. Originally, his mental psionic commands could mentally control any form of marine life in the ocean, no matter what the said creature was. However, modern DC writers downplay his psionic talents now because of new scientific studies that prove most sea life isn't intelligent enough to hold conversations or thoughts that humans might comprehend or be able to perform. Modern explanations of his mental powers explain that he simply adds desires or impulses to the marine life's brain to influence them to do his bidding through cerebral capacities. Aquaman could also not survive on land for extended periods of time due to his Atlantean heritage, though this has been ignored or reduced in recent times, either by writers forgetting about this handicap or writers trying to eliminate it. Modern examples have had him being able to survive on land for long periods of time, but in areas of extraordinary heat or lack of moisture, he feels distress as a result. When Aquaman had the harpoon on his left arm, originally the said harpoon was just a piece of regular metal, while the latter version was that of a harder alloy. Further still, he obtained a magically enchanted hand that could dehydrate water from objects and shoot water from the said hand, either it being freezing or scalding, or even control water sources. Finally, his hand was revived altogether with its own revival from death leading up to the New 52. Mera. First appearance, Aquaman, issue 11, September 1963. Mera was originally a queen from another dimension, Dimension Aqua, where there is nothing but ocean. A criminal decided to seize control of Aqua in its capital city, Zebel. Mera refused the takeover and was exiled from Zebel as a result of this. Traveling to Earth, she enlisted the help of Aquaman and Aqualad to help her retake her homeland. Successful, she took him up on his offer to live with him in the main DC universe. The pair became close rather quickly, and she took her place as the Queen of Atlantis. Soon after their marriage, she was pregnant with their child, Aquababy. The baby was actually named after his father, Arthur Curry Jr. The new family's joy was short-lived as Black Manta soon kidnapped Aquababy as part of a plot for his own twisted form of a utopia. Though Aquaman and Aqualad were able to foil the plot, Arthur Curry Jr. died from suffocation. Sadly, the death of their son did cause a rift between the two of them. Mera went as far as even saying that Arthur's mixed blood was bad genes and blamed the death on him for this fact. Later on, the rift went even deeper, and eventually both parted ways, with Mera returning to Dimension Aqua. After the New 52 relaunch of Aquaman, Mera consistently stands by her husband's side despite his ill-favored reputation with his own people, as well as her own reputation of being an equally less Aquawoman. They enjoy favor as actually being a very close couple and remaining together despite threats to Aquaman's life, her own life, or that of their kingdom's existence. Mera's powers and abilities were similar to that of Aquaman, though not at the same intensity. Aqualad. First appearance, Adventure Comics, issue 200C, February 1960. Much like other sidekicks in the Silver Age, Aqualad's powers and origin were similar to that of Aquaman himself. Being an amphibian being who was left to die as a child due to fears of a curse. Being born with purple eyes, he was abandoned and left to die in a similar way to Aquaman, but through circumstances he survives and meets Aquaman later on. Having a similar background, they both become close and have many adventures together. Ironically, he had a childhood fear and phobia of large schools of fish that persisted with him well into his late teenage years. However, once Aquaman met and married Mera and had a child with her, Aqualad, whose real name was Garth, figured that he wasn't as important to Aquaman anymore and left his company. During this time, he became a founding member of the Teen Titans. Having adventures with the Titans, it helped to boost his own confidence, and around this time he first met Tula, the original Aquagirl. Afterwards, through a plot by Black Manta, he had to fight against Aquaman to the death for the life of Aquababy. Though the pair did not kill one another as Manta had planned, Aquababy died, and Garth became even more distant from Aquaman and realized that if he had had to, he would have killed him to save his child's life. Tula was killed during the Crisis on Infinite Earths, and her death deeply affected Garth for many years following the incident. Afterwards, Garth went through trial and discovery and rite of passage as a young man himself. Tapping into new powers and through circumstances, he abandoned the title of Aqualad and renamed himself as the hero Tempest. Aquagirl. There has been more than one young woman to use the mantle of Aquagirl. The most iconic was Tula. First appearance, Aquaman Volume 1, Issue 33, May-June 1967. After losing her parents soon after birth, she was adopted into one of the royal Atlantean houses and remains in Atlantis until a fateful encounter with Aqualad. The two become rather close, often pairing up with Aquaman for many adventures. However, during the Crisis on Infinite Earths, Tula was one of the many heroes and heroines who died. Her tragic death shook Garth for many years afterwards. Ocean Master. First appearance, Aquaman, Issue 29, September 1966. The original origin of Ocean Master is that Orm Curry is the half-brother of Aquaman from his father, Tom Curry. After Atlana died, Tom met and later married a regular human woman much like himself, Mary O'Sullivan. Orm Curry was born from their union and grew up in the shadow of his more successful and loved brother Arthur. Added to this, Orm was jealous that he was just a regular human with no special abilities, while Arthur was a mixed Atlantean-blooded person. Deciding to vanish from Aquaman's life, years later he returned, renaming himself Orm Marius, and the villain alias of Ocean Master. Using technology to battle Aquaman and Aqualad, however, Arthur was shocked when he learned that Ocean Master was actually his half-brother and held back during their fight. Mistaking this for fear, Orm later decided to seize the throne of Atlantis unsuccessfully. Being a regular human, he needed a special suit to survive underwater and to combat Aquaman on a level playing field. Ocean Master is a regular threat of Aquaman. The modern New 52 continuity of Ocean Master is that he's a full-blooded Atlantean, while Aquaman is the one of mixed blood descent. In this continuity, Atlana and Tom have a child, Arthur Curry, who is Aquaman. To protect the child from Atlantean tyranny, he's left on the surface, but through circumstances, she later returns to Atlantis and forcefully marries a member of the Atlantean Guard. Thus, another child is born, Orm, the Ocean Master. In terms of ability, the pre-crisis Ocean Master was a regular man who used technology for himself as well as his henchmen during conflicts with Aquaman or his allies. Eventually, Ocean Master would use Atlantean relics to equip himself and allow himself and his crew to survive underwater. In the New 52 reboot, the full-blooded Ocean Master has abilities exactly like that of Aquaman, meaning he's capable of breathing underwater and summoning marine animals. Orm is physically stronger than normal Atlanteans due to his royal lineage, having been on equal footing with Aquaman in terms of battles. Black Manta. First appearance, Aquaman, Issue 35, September 1967. Aquaman's greatest adversary actually had no real conclusive origin story for decades after his introduction. His first real origin in 1993 was met with mixed reception from fans. Though he battled Aquaman for decades and was responsible for the death of his son, Black Manta was revealed to be an African descent man, with a comment to Aquaman about why he called himself the Black Manta. Besides this, there are two versions of an origin that has been accepted by DC as valid continuity for the character. This version has him being a young child growing up in Baltimore within the American state of Maryland, having a love of playing near the Chesapeake Bay. However, the boy will be kidnapped and forced to serve upon a ship for an unknown amount of time, all the while being sexually abused by his captors. One day, the boy saw Aquaman with a pod of dolphins swimming in the distance. Trying to get their attention for help, he was unsuccessful. Deciding to finally defend himself, the lad killed one of his captors with a knife. Later, being able to escape, he now hated the emotionless, unforgiving sea and Aquaman as a representation of it. He later vowed to become the ocean's true master. Another version in 2003 tells of Manta being an autistic orphan placed in Gotham City's Arkham Asylum, feeling comfortable in the freezing cold water and yet screaming with pain when placed in cotton bedsheets. No one at the asylum could figure out why the boy was in such pain. Watching television footage of Aquaman also fascinated him as well, as he was later experimented upon by Arkham scientists. One treatment managed to cure his autism, but made him extraordinarily violent as a result, later killing the scientist who administered the procedure on him and escaping from Arkham. Both origins have not exactly cleared up any unknown facts or plot holes with the character or his reasons for despising Aquaman as well. It's later revealed in the New 52 that Aquaman killed Black Manta's father by accident for attacking his own father. Originally, Black Manta devised his own suit for travel and combat in deep sea environments. Being that of a brilliant tactician, he did what no other villain of Aquaman did: kill someone that Aquaman cared for by staging a plot for creating a utopia and forcing Aquaman and Aqualad to fight another to the death for the life of Aquababy. Having Aquababy in a trap that took the air out of a containment bubble that the child was placed in, the infant suffocated before either Aquaman or Aqualad was able to save him. Though the character has been consistently against Aquaman, some of the best writing for the character in years have been with the recent Aquaman comic at the time of the New 52, and fans are generally happy with the direction of the character, despite the lukewarm origin stories at the time still persisting with the New 52. Black Manta's battlesuit is adapted to an oceanic environment, giving him complete resistance to the cold and pressures of deep-sea conditions and thus granting him the ability to breathe underwater. Whether this is due to a hidden oxygen supply or its ability to extract oxygen from the water like gills of a fish is unknown. A jetpack with functions in or out of water, a telepathic scrambler used to temporarily disrupt Aquaman of his aquatic telepathic ability with marine life, and a variety of weapons including twin blades, a handheld trident, energy beams, and a harpoon gun that he can fire from his right wrist gauntlet, miniaturized torpedoes and optic blasts emitted from the lenses in his helmet. It's also not known how his suit is powered, or how long it can function without needing to be recharged, or even if it needs to be. Black Manta can also use such vehicles as a modified Manta Ray submarine for traveling. Black Manta was loosely adopted for the Justice League Unlimited cartoon with the character of Devil Ray. The character was actually referenced in the Aquaman comic Aquaman, Sword of Atlantis, issue 52, July 2007, with the second Aquaman asking a question in reference to Manta's name and replies, quote-unquote, "Wasn't he called Devil Ray?" In Batman, the Brave and the Bold, a more faithful representation of Manta to the comics appeared for the show. Atlantis. Within the DC universe, Atlantis is a real continent that exists. First appearance, mentioned, Action Comics, issue 17, October 1939. Actual appearance, Action Comics, issue 18, November 1939. The history is that the landmass that the DC universe calls Atlantis was first settled by beings 65 million years ago, before the dinosaurs went extinct. These said beings were of extraterrestrial origin. 1 million years ago, Atlantean society flourished, while modern humans were settling different regions of Europe, the Near East, and Africa. Regions of Atlantis vary in terms of importance from location to subject matter with relation to Aquaman or his supporting characters. Regions of Atlantis are Poseidonus, Tritonus, Venturia, Orania. Though actual historic records of Atlantean society and information are intensely vague, one Bronze Age example was that Atlantis came to be the center of early human civilization. Its king at the time, Orion ordered the construction of a protective outer dome over the city as a defense against warring and desperate barbarian tribes. But shortly after the dome's completion, a meteor crashed into the Earth, destroying most of the upper world and sinking the city to the bottom of the ocean. Orion's brother, Shakalo, departed with a number of followers through underground tunnels in order to reclaim another sunken city which was a territory of the Empire, Tritonus, whose inhabitants had not survived the meteor impact. After a few years, Atlantean scientists developed a serum that would permanently let their people breathe underwater, as a consequence of the magic used by Shakalo in settling Tritonus. The Tritonians were further mutated to have fishtails instead of legs. Some descendants of Shakalo's son Dardanius also inherited his telepathy, which was marked by blonde hair, extremely rare among Atlanteans as a feature of physical distinguishment. Dardanius' son Corax further had the ability to command sea creatures. After he led them alongside the Tritonians in a revolution against the king, he was exiled, and children born with blonde hair, the quote-unquote mark of Corax, were generally viewed as abominations and left to die upon discovery. This curse was mentioned with the Bronze Age origin for Aquaman, but has mostly been ignored with modern comics. It was not in much favor with readers to begin with. With modern Aquaman history, it's all but been forgotten, in favor of more recent works with reference to Aquaman's history and origin. Most of the modern origin is a retelling of the Silver Age version of Aquaman's origin, with his father, Tom Curry, and his mother, Atlana. In general, Atlanteans on average are slightly physically stronger than a normal human being. Facts that seem to repeat throughout Aquaman history through the eras of comics to golden, silver, bronze, and modern is that Atlantean royalty seemed to be stronger, much stronger in some cases, and more durable than normal Atlanteans even. And possibly human Atlantean mixed blood hybrid beings like Aquaman seem to have even more potential still. Originally within the DC universe, Aquaman was treated like any other hero, with respect and praise. But due to decades of writers not actually knowing what to do with the character, and key plot holes not filled in until the modern era of comics, has the character gained the reputation of a weak and pessimistic hero, his powers not having much use, meaning, or impact. Many Aquamans at the turn of the 21st century have praised the New 52 relaunch of the character as bringing solid writing and new ideas to the character. So much so, at the time when it was introduced, it was considered one of the best-selling DC titles. Aquaman is truly the king of the seven seas.